In this video, we'll show you how to use report parameters with your report, including static parameters and single and multiple parameters from user input. We'll also cover how to use a list from a data source to generate the parameter selections, and show an example of using cascading parameters. We'll start out with a very simple report design, where the parameter is hard-coded to display just one state. We'll progress to a report where the state to be displayed is collected from the user. The next step in the progression will be to multiple values in user input. So you see here we have Washington, Arizona, and Colorado. From there, we'll go to a situation where the parameter selections are determined by selecting them out of a database. And then we'll end up with a report where the selections are cascading. So if we select a country like Australia, then we can select a region like New South Wales or Queensland, and when we preview that, we'll see only the selections from Queensland, Australia. Telerik reports are based in class libraries, so we'll start by making a new class library called parameter demo. And when the default class is created, I'm just going to delete that. And then we'll add a new item, and the new item is going to be based on the Telerik report template, and we'll just call this parameter basics. And when the wizard opens up, I'm going to create a new report. It's going to be based on a new data source. The new data source is going to be a database, the AdventureWorks database. Then I'm going to open up the query builder, dismiss the add table dialog, and I'm going to enter some SQL that I've already written. And what this SQL does, probably best demonstrated by executing the query. You see it's going to bring out a vendor, state, city, address, and postal code from the database. So I tell this OK, click Next. It's going to be a standard report. I'm going to add all of the available fields into the details section. It's going to be a stepped report, which isn't going to be relevant in this case because there's no stepping to it. And then I'm going to select the Solstice report format for the styling. Click Finish, and our report's been automatically generated for us. If we take a quick look at this report, see it's going to print our information out for us, and it's not sorted or filtered in any fashion. So we go back over to the design side and open up the Properties window, click on the report, it'll bring up this property for report parameters. If I add a new report parameter, I can give the parameter a name. We'll call this state select, and then we'll give it a default value of AZ for Arizona. We tell it OK. We can now set our report filters. So if I click on the ellipses here, it'll bring up the filter dialog for me. I tell it I want to have a new filter, and when I click on the drop down here to enter the expression, I can bring up the expression editor. I can use this trim function that's a system function, and then what I want to trim is a fields.state column. And the reason I'm doing that is because this is a 3-character entry, and there's a trailing space on all the state abbreviations. Then for the value, when I select this drop down, you see I have my parameters.state select. Now because this is going to be evaluated by the expression evaluator at runtime, this has to start with an equal sign. So if it doesn't, I just make sure that there's one in there. So I click OK, and now if I preview the report, once it regenerates, you'll see that I have a report that now only has entries from the state of Arizona. So that's a pretty useful start, but it's not very useful if you want to see customers from states other than Arizona. So we'll go back to the design side, and we'll make a few changes here. We'll bring up the report parameter collection editor again, and you see this section here called UI. So the first thing I'm going to do is change it so that the UI is visible, and then I'm going to say enter state code as the text. And then what that's going to give us is if we click on the preview tab, you'll notice that we now have a space up here to enter the state code. Now we've still only got 3 states in our report, but if we put in a state like Washington, for instance, and click the preview button to regenerate the report, Now we get a lot more entries, all from the state of Washington. Okay, so that's a step in the right direction if you just want to look at one state at a time. But let's say that you want to see multiple states at a time. We'll go back over to the designer, and we'll open up the Report Parameters Collection Editor once again, expand the UI section, and what we'll put in here instead for multi-value is say that we're going to permit multi-value entries. And then the other thing that we need to be aware of is that up here in our filters section, we've said it's going to be equal, but we're going to give it a comma delimited list of states. So we're going to change this equals operator to be in. We tell that OK. Now if we go over to the preview page, you see it'll still extract our Arizona for us, but now we can put in a comma delimited list that includes Illinois and Colorado. And then when we click preview, it's going to extract for us all of the customers that are in Illinois and Colorado as well. Notice also that if I click my drop-down list here, I get an edit box that has each of my entries separated out on a separate line. So if I were to put Washington in there as well, then close up the box, it gives me a comma delimited list that includes Washington. So we're still making progress here, but having a user type in state abbreviations and so forth is error-prone design. So we'll go back over to the designer, go back to the Report Parameter Collection Editor one more time, expand the UI, then we'll expand the Available Values section, and you see that we can assign a data source to this list. So I'm going to create another project data source. It's going to be based on a database. I'm going to open up the query builder and paste in some SQL. What the SQL does, it selects the state province codes from the state province table. Now if we execute this query, you should be aware that there's a lot of state and province codes in there that are numeric before we get to the state codes from the United States, as well as the province codes from Germany and Australia and France and so forth. So we'll tell this OK, and then we'll give the data set a name, and we'll call this maybe AdventureWorks States. And we'll finish up with this. And you see it's put our AdventureWorks States as the data source. Now we need to find the display member. The display member is state, and also the value member is state. So we tell this OK. And now what we'll get when we go over to the preview is a drop-down list that we can select our items from. So we scroll down here, we can say Arizona and Illinois, and maybe we'll do California because it's got quite a few entries into it. And then if we click on the preview button, it'll extract a couple pages worth of information for us and display it based on the entries that we've selected from this list. So that eliminates the possibility of making typing errors in terms of the data that's going into our filter criteria. It's also possible to initialize or set the list programmatically. And you would do that in code behind. And the code that you would use to do that would be something like defining an array list, populating the members of the array list, and then saying report parameter 0 dot value is equal to this array list. Now the final aspect of parameters that we're going to take a look at here is going to deal with cascading or hierarchical parameters. So what I'm going to do is add another new item based on the Telerik reporting template. We'll call this one cascading. When the wizard opens up, we'll start building the report. We'll open up the query builder, and once again we'll paste in some SQL that we've previously written. And what this SQL is going to do is select all the distinct country region codes and state province codes in addition to the cities from the relevant tables inside the AdventureWorks database. So if we execute this query, the data that it's going to return is going to be all of our states and also provinces. So we'll just tell this OK. Then the report type will be pretty similar to the last one. We'll use a standard report. We'll select all three fields, put them in the details section, use a stepped report. We're going to use the solstice formatting, and then finish with the wizard. And so what that'll give us, if we preview the report without doing any filtering, it's going to give us all of the states and provinces and so forth, all kind of jumbled up together. So now we'll go over to the Properties tab, click on the report, open up the report parameters, and we'll add a new parameter. We'll give it a name of country region param. Expand the UI section, and the prompt text is going to be country/region, and we set the visible property to true. Next, we'll expand the available values, drop down the data source. We're going to add another new project data source. We're going to call this one countries and use the query builder to tell it that we want to select the names and the country region codes from person, country, region. And that's just going to give us the countries and their corresponding code. We tell this OK and finish. So the display member is going to be the country name. The value member is going to be the associated country region code. And then because we'd like to display this in alphabetical order, we'll click on the ellipses next to sorting, tell it we want to add a new sort expression. The sort expression is going to be based on the name, and it's going to be in ascending order. Now we're going to add a second parameter, and we're going to call this state province param, and then we'll move down here, set the text to be state or province, and the visible property is going to be true. Then once again we'll make a new project data source, open the query builder, dismiss the add table dialog, paste in a little bit of SQL, and this is going to select the country region code, the name of the state or province, and the state province code from the state province table. So we execute that, see what kind of data that returns. You can take a glance at it down here and get the idea. So we'll tell this OK. We'll just call this data set provinces, and then for the display we'll select the name field, and the value member is going to be the state province code. Now because we only want to display the provinces that are associated with the country that we selected, we're going to add a new filter expression, and the filter expression is going to be that the country region code is going to be equal to the parameter country region code that we selected in the first parameter that we defined. And once again, we're going to make sure that we've got an equal sign in here and click OK. And we'll also set a sort parameter here, the way that we did for the countries, and this is going to be based on the name in ascending order. So now we've got our parameters defined. We also need to set a couple of filters on our report to keep it synchronized with what we select in the parameter selection area. So first we'll make sure that the country region code is equal to the country region parameter. Add in the equal sign, and we'll set up a second one to make sure that the state province code is going to be equal to our state province parameter. So that's how we're going to filter things. Now our report that displays down below here in the detailed area will reflect the selections that we've made in the input parameters. So now we should just be able to click on the preview tab here, and after the report recompiles, we have country region, so we can select Australia. Now if you select something that doesn't have any associated provinces, the report's not going to generate for us. Then we select Queensland, preview, and now we have a report that shows all of the cities that are in Queensland, Australia. And let's talk for a moment about how we would get this onto an actual application. I can add a new project. This is going to be a Windows application, and this is going to be called Report Viewer. And one of the really neat things about this report viewer is we can do this all on the design surface. I'm going to scroll down here and drag in a report viewer component onto my form. We'll just expand that. And the next thing that we need to do is add a reference, and the reference that we want to add is going to be to the other project this parameter demo, which contains all of our reports. And once we've done that, we can click on the Properties page, and for our report viewer, if we scroll down, there is a report property. If I open that, then I'm going to select this cascading report that we just developed. And that's all there is to it. So I'm just going to tell it to run the application. And when my form comes up, if I refresh it, it'll load my report into the window for me. I can select a value. Let's do something a little different this time. Maybe we'll select France, and then France has a lot of provinces. And of course, I selected one without any cities. I know one that has cities, and that's the Seine province, and that's because it contains Paris. So if we refresh the report, see we get Paris, France, with the state province code of 75 listed in our report. So you can do that entirely without programming. Now, if you want to, you can do a little bit of programming. We're going to put in the page load event here, you can say report viewer 1.refresh report, and that'll even eliminate the need for us having to click on the refresh button in our report to see the selection areas of the report. They'll just be there without refreshing. So those are the basic building blocks of passing parameters into reports. Telerik's done a lot of work for you in setting all these things up. You don't have to remember much to get a parameterized report displayed on your system. For more Telerik videos, technical discussion forums, and examples, please go to www.telerik.com.